Hello everyone and welcome to the archive. What do I mean by that? Well, there's actually a few projects that I've done in my time here since I've had a YouTube channel that I haven't been able to share with you, and usually this is entirely my fault, of course. The most common culprit is seasonality. So I often start projects whenever I've got the whim, and not necessarily the best time to do them. So the project for today is one of these victims. So I wanted to try one of these free patterns. A little while ago, I was researching free patterns that you could use for historical dress. There's a video on the channel here for that. I'll link it down below. But when I came across that, I started really exploring Mood's pattern library. So they have a blog. Mood is a fabric store in the US, in case you haven't heard of it. And they have a great blog where they share a lot of free patterns. I've used one other from there, I think, and this was my second time using a pattern from their library. I always wanted one of these super beautiful Milkmaid dresses that was all the rage last summer with, like, you know, the cottagecore vibes, and I just loved it. I really wanted one like that, and I wanted to make one because I can make things, but I didn't want to pattern one because, in case you're new here, I don't love patterning, and I don't think you need to love patterning to sew. That's why there are patterns out there, and so there's no shame in using a pattern, particularly if they're free and you're thinking of being a little thrifty. So this project was to try out that pattern because Mood actually have a free Milkmaid dress pattern and it looked really good, and I wanted to use fabric from my stash because the goal was also to use more fabric from my stash, and so I ended up pulling out this beautiful lightweight, I think it's kind of like a crepe, it's definitely a polyester of some kind, but it's a very lightweight fabric, and I thought it would work well. I also used some plain cotton sheeting, like the kind that you get that's super wide for your cotton sheets, that I just had in my stash as well, as sort of a lining slash interlining. Because I thought it would be nice to have it a little bit more structured, but also if you remove this, you'll have a much nicer dress as well. And I had all the materials in my stash, I had a free pattern, and I was looking forward to making this dress. Unfortunately, I did decide to make it, I think it was the end of September, so it's just the end of summer, and I managed to wear it once for my friend's bachelorette party, and then it started raining, and you know, I put the summer dress back in the wardrobe and I forgot about this project and I never got to share it with you. But the weather is nice again. I've actually pulled it out to wear again since. So I really wanted to share this project because I actually think the pattern was really great. It was really easy to put together, but I'll talk to you more about that in the outro. So let's just get into sewing. Hello, so all the pieces are cut out. Now I want to give you a quick little update. So I am straying a little bit from the pattern instructions, the very, very brief pattern instructions that would give you on the blog post. And instead what I'm going to do is I decided not to do a lining for it. I notoriously on this channel don't do linings. But what I'm going to do is interlining, and that's because the fabric I picked for this is this very lightweight, very drapey, sort of printed crepe pattern fabric. I think it's a poly. It was in my stash, someone gave it to me for free, so I thought it would work really well for this. But it's super drapey, and I think the dress would look nicer, especially for the bodice to be a little bit more structured. So I've cut out all the pattern pieces out of this, I think it's a poly cotton sheeting. It's very simple, very lightweight. It's just gonna add a tiny little bit more structure to it. And so now we have to do the awful thing about interlining. I love interlining because it means that you can use fabrics that you typically wouldn't be able to for certain types of dresses or get a different result. But it does mean you have to then paste all these pieces into one so that you can treat them all as one when you're sewing. I'm not going to baste. Instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin everything very, very carefully. I'm going to use as many pins as I can. And then I'm just going to put them all through the overlocker on all sides. And then this means that when I sew up all the seams, all the edges should be already finished. And I can do more than one task in one go. So that's the plan. Pin very carefully, then wrangle with my overlocker and hope for the best. So this dress is on a very tight deadline, and as always I did a lot of midnight sewing and didn't film any of it. So I'm really sorry, but I'm going to walk you through really quickly about what I've done with this pattern. So this is the mood pattern and it's free. The instructions are very simple. So all I've done that you saw me do was that I overlocked all the edges to all of the pieces, and this means I'll have a finished edge no matter what. And then the big alteration I made from the original pattern is I decided to make the back panel shirred. So shirring is when you add a bobbin elastic. So I wound the bobbin thread for the machine by hand with elastic thread, and then you fiddle with your tension and your stitch length. In my case it was the highest tension on my machine, a number 9, and the longest stitch length, which was a 4.5. And it sort of gathers the fabric a little bit, and I can't really do it with one hand, but it gives it some elasticity. And then what you just have to make sure is that when this is all gathered up, that it matches the pattern piece, and mine does, which is really nice. This just means that when you wear it, this can stretch to give you a little bit more ease, and it's something I've noticed that a lot of like really beautiful modern dresses, like all the Reformation dresses and things like that, have a shirred panel in the back, and it just provides a really like flexible fit. So that's what I've done. This does mean I'm going to be putting in a zipper at the side, which is why I've left the side open here. I have the back panel left to sew in like this, just with normal seams, but I have done the rest of all of the seams and pressed them. And then the next thing I need to do is to sort out the boob area, which you can see is missing here, because that's this panel piece. And what the first thing they recommend that you do is to do 2 buttonholes on. So you fold it in half, it's one pattern piece. This one I didn't interline because I thought it would look better without. And then they tell you to do 2 buttonholes at the front here so you can thread a ribbon through. I actually did 2 eyelets because my machine had this eyelet setting that I'd never tried. So I did, and they turned out really nice. I just added a little bit of fray check and then I used an awl to poke through. And now I've just pinned it in half because I think the next step is for me to top stitch in the channel for the ribbon at the top. And then I'm going to sew these 2 seams, and then I'm going to look at the instructions, like I can't remember. I think there's something to do with the straps, and the straps are just 2 rectangles that they tell you to cut out, which I can't find right now. But they're just 2 rectangles, but they have some weird... The instructions look a bit trippy, so I'll come back to you for that. Okay, so the straps weren't actually complicated, it was just some nonsense if you were lining it. So I'm not lining it, as you can tell. I don't know why I have a personal vendetta against linings, but I do. Anyway, what they have you do in the instructions is that you kind of encase the point at which you sew the straps on is also the point at which you sew the lining in. So you finish all the top raw edges and you encase the straps in it, and you do it all in one go, which is really nice. I've obviously not done that, so all I did was I lined up the raw edge, well in this case the overlocked edge of the strap with the arm side, and then sewed a simple seam. I pressed it open, pressed it down, and then what I'm going to have to do is that when I sew in that bust piece, I'm just going to have to fold in this seam allowance like this, and then top stitch the bust piece in, or do a normal seam with it. Anyway, this is going to get finished in that seam anyway, so it'll be fine. And then this edge will get finished in the sleeve. Some more late night sewing has happened, so I'm here for your morning daylight update. So this is what it's looking like. I think it's looking super cute. So I think last time I inserted the bust panel. So that is just a tricky seam around some corners, but you literally just sew it on as a normal seam. All the edges are already finished, and then you just adjust the ribbon to fit. I think it looks super cute. Then the other thing I did was, because I mentioned I wanted to try it on, I did baste in a zipper and I tried it on and it looked okay. I only did one alteration, was I took in this side back to the back by about 1/4 inch on either side, just for a little bit more fit. I think because the smocking does give a lot, I'm not worried. And then I did up this side seam by a couple of inches so that I can put in a side seam zipper. And then, as you can see, it's got sleeves. Wow! The sleeves were super easy. I usually dread sleeves, but this was very straightforward. So the way they recommend that you do it is you sew 2 lines of gathering stitches across the sleeve head, and then you sew up the side seam however you want, and then you hem by 1 inch, so actually a total of 2 inches that you turn up at the bottom. I think I probably would have gone narrower because I like a narrower band here, but that's where we are. Then you thread elastic through it, and then you close up that little seam, and then you've got a little gathered puff sleeve. I will say a PSA in case you are making this dress and you're not doing a lining like me. This is pretty bulky with the 2 edges of the strap and then the sleeve, and then when it's turned back on itself, it's quite bulky. So I think in hindsight, what I would have done is instead of sewing the strap down together, I would just iron it in half so I had the mark, sew one side down so that when you sew the sleeve in, the seam allowance of the sleeve can lay flat between the strap, and I think that would have reduced bulk because then it's not doubling back on itself. And it also helped finish that edge if you don't have, if you haven't overlocked it or whatever. So yeah, just a recommendation in case you're doing this. But yeah, I think it's looking super cute. I think this is pretty much done. The last thing that I really need to do on this at all is to turn under the seam allowance at the back and stitch that down. I think I'm just going to top stitch that into place. And then I can move on to the skirt. So the first thing I'm going to do on the skirt is I'm going to attach the pockets on the sides on a side seam. So yeah, I think we're going to make the deadline. So the dress is nearly finished, and for that I'm sorry, I haven't given you an update in a long time. But basically all I did was I assembled the skirt panels, which are just long seams, and then I just sewed it onto the bodice. I basted it all before and pinned it really well to make sure that the seams matched up as much as possible. And then I put in a side zipper, which is on this side, which is just your normal zipper affair. I don't have any advice for zippers because they're a mess. I just tried it on, and I'm making one alteration quite far into the construction process that I just wanted to mention in case you find this too. So I'm quite short-waisted, and when I tried it on the bodice by itself, I thought it would be fine because of where the seam would hit. But I noticed while I had this on that I didn't take any footage over that, I'm sorry, but that there was some rippling here. So what happened was that the bodice was too short to fit between my underbust and my waist. And so this would like bunch up a little bit. It wasn't terrible, I could have worn it like that. But I thought since I've made this dress, I might as well try and make it a little bit better. And I've done this to things before. This is not the proper way to do it. What you should really do is take out the zipper, unpin the bodice from the skirt and do the whole thing. But instead, I'm just going to round out the front of the bodice where the most of the wrinkling was happening, because there wasn't much at the sides of the back at all. And I don't really want to unpick anything else. So what I did was I measured sort of how much I should take up, which was about 1/2 inch at the center front. And then I just sort of tapered it off to the sides. And then I just unpicked it. And I've rematched it. So something that is important to keep in mind is that I'm only taking away from the bodice, not the skirt. So you can see that the seam allowance is no longer even here. So like you have to account for the excess. So they shouldn't match up, that's fine. And then once this is done, I'll take it back to the overlocker and trim back the seam allowance. I'll try it on first, of course. But yeah, so I just wanted to show you that. So I just unpick. I do the new stitching line, which is this one here, and now I'm just pinning and matching it up, and I'm also going to baste it and try it on and see if that works. And if it does, then I'll just sew it up and try it on again just to make sure, you never know. And yeah, this is just a quick fix if you're like me, short-waisted. Okay, so I've actually remembered to record this because I'm just trying on the basted, and you can see that it's still wrinkling a little bit. So there's like a little bit of looseness here, especially when but you can see that when I stand up straight, well, I guess I rarely ever stand up straight, but like this, it's sort of okay. I think it's actually because the crepe outer fabric is a little bit looser than the interlining. But I think it'll be fine. It's really comfortable. I'm afraid of moving it any more up because then it'll be a bit shorter. And as you can see, the fact that I've tapered it isn't super noticeable. So yeah, it's hemming time. So I just wanted to show you because I'm doing something that isn't quite typical. So usually what you can do is you just mark your hem and then you can turn up that hem and just sew it down. to the wrong side. That's a perfectly fine hem, and I did that by putting the dress on my dress form and then measuring up from the floor. I think that gives me the most even results. And so I marked it with pins, and then I drew on that line. But I did notice that a lot of my panels have warped, I guess because a lot of them are cut on the bias. They have warped unevenly. So you can see that my hemline here is a few inches, and then there are places where it's like 1 inch, or trying to find it, but there's bits where it goes, yeah, like here, really scant. So instead what I decided to do was just sewing to the right side. I sewed on this bias tape to make sure that the edges are straight following that sewing line, that stitch line. And now I'm just going to trim back all this excess, and then I'm going to fold this to the inside and sew that down. I've done this on a couple of things before, and I find it gives a little bit of nice weight to the hem without being too bulky. So I'm going to give it a good press and then just try that and see if it goes well. The other thing that you can do when you do this is that you can also just fold a little bit of the actual hem inwards as well, and then sew the tape down if you've got more excess to do that. So yeah, I'm going to press it, trim it, and pin it and see how that goes. And here is the reveal. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a wrap up about what I thought of the project now that I've got some distance from it. I actually think it turned out really, really well. There are some changes I would make. I think I didn't get the fit on the sleeve heads, on the sleeve straps quite as nice. I think they need to be slightly tighter for me, because sometimes I noticed that if I didn't stand properly and I hunched ever so slightly, the sleeves could fall off. But also wearing the sleeves down is a really cool look as well. So not a disadvantage. I really like this dress. I thought the pattern was really great. The instructions are always a little bit vague, and I think because of experience, I'm very reluctant to actually follow pattern instructions. So what you saw in this video was my adaptation of those pattern instructions. But I do think they're okay to follow. Like, you might have to figure out a couple of things like I did. But I think in the end you can get there. And as always, if you have any questions at all about the construction of this dress, if you want to try the pattern, if you're just starting the pattern, leave a comment down below and I'm happy to help in any way that I can. But otherwise, it was really successful, and actually so far I've had such great experiences with the mood patterns that I will be using more, and I think I might go and crawl through the library again to try and find some more that could be used for historical inspired garments. So yeah, stay tuned for that if you'd like, and yeah, I'll see you very soon.